The design part is super interesting. You learn a lot. You need to keep in mind everything from MAPs to like where you're positioning light switches, like even
Mm.
how customers like go through the store. What is you look into every micro details. Like it's really like a deep dive in a short amount of time into
Okay.
a design. And I really enjoyed that part, I have to be honest, and I learned a lot. But then the frustrating part becomes when the drawing goes to the construction site.
In these times of fast change, have you ever thought architecture might be falling a bit short and wondered what's next? Well, let's find out. My name is Luca De Stefano. I'm one of the founders of Known A, and this is Boundary Breaking Businesses Beyond Architecture. Designers and commissioners of tomorrow speaking today.
Episode 10: The Business of Retail. Hello everyone and welcome back at Beyond Architecture for our last episode. If you're watching the video, you already noticed there is something different. It's the last episode, so we wanted to have a bit of fun. So we are experimenting with a live recording. And the guest as well is kind of a special guest, of course. If you have been following us for a bit, you might know that the first pilot episode was with a friend, where today we're also recording with a good friend. And that comes kind of handy, because if you want to experiment, that's perfect. We will talk about retail space, retail design, commercial projects. So our guest has been working with Aesop, Philippa K, and now she's very active with Nike, amongst others, of course. So she will give us a little insight not only of what's the future of retail space, but also of what kind of opportunities come for architects and how these processes work. So where can we jump in? We connect with my living room because today, for a special Beyond Architecture Living Room edition, we talk with Valentina Anne Piras.
Hello, everyone.
Vale, good to see you.
Nice to see you. Yeah,
very special experiment.
I know.
Yeah, we have to talk about retail.
Mhm.
I have to say, when I do episodes with friends, it's actually a bit harder because I know a lot of background, so there is too many questions to ask. So I want to take it easy. I want to make myself a bit more comfortable, and then we will find a way from there.
Sounds good.
Why retail then? Why did you decide to work on commercial projects? Where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine most architects in school dream of designing museums and beautiful buildings. Not very often you hear of people wanting to design stores or to manage the construction of stores.
Yeah, I mean, me and you met actually through university, so you know that I'm not the typical. I was not the typical architectural student. That was not my dream. Making houses, like, I don't know, like for social housing or museums or big commercial projects, like, was never my ideal job, and working for a big name was never my ideal job. But after really a small stint in architecture, I realized I really enjoyed seeing things happening and happening fast. And retail is that. Retail gives you that thrill of putting an idea into paper and after a few months seeing it in reality, which I think is the lack of architecture many times. They're really long projects, and they might still remain like on paper and never in reality.
Yeah, I never thought of it. I never thought of this speed element in retail design. It makes a lot of sense, I feel, no? Because in large projects, there is so many stakeholders, so many approvals and stuff like that. Here, there's a corporate stakeholder that wants to open these spaces very quickly.
Yeah.
Time is money. Okay. That's an interesting point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something you realized along the way? Like, how did that happen in your life? Did you start already with retail in your first steps?
I always had this sort of passion or fascination with retail. Actually, when I was younger, I was always saying like, oh, I would love to do like the home line for like Dolce & Gabbana kind of thing. It was always like this fetishism of mine. I used to like collect Vogues and stuff when I was way younger. So it felt like the perfect combination, like the architecture and the fashion. And there is a lot of example of architects in fashion as well, like in that world. Like in Italy, for example, we had Ferré, which was an example of like an architect working in a retail field, and there is many more. It just felt like the perfect combination of these two things and a need to see things happening. I think I'm really I'm not just a visual mind. I really need to see it in reality and be able to touch it, to feel like that my project has my baby has come to life, kind of thing.
Your baby has come to life.
Yeah, they're all babies. Unfortunately, they're all babies, the good ones and the bad ones.
How many stores did you design or managed so far?
Ooh, not as many as I would have liked. I think I could have done way more. Uh, I think I'm closer to like 30 or something.
30.
Effective. Like I always count the projects that I really work myself, not something that is like minimum support.
Okay.
So I think managed around 30 and designed a bit more because I started as a designer in retail. So there it was way more, and it was with a company, a Dutch company who was actually really involved in development. Like they were
Mhm.
releasing like many stores a year. So the design part a bit more, the managing a bit less, but still they take time as well.
Yeah, of
Some
course.
time, not a lot. But
Well,
some time.
you dropped a few big names before. I don't know. It depends on the editing I will do of this because I've never done an episode live. But maybe it's good to just mention a few of the brands you've been working with, just to get a sense of what type of projects you've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, so in my experience, and what you can do when you work in retail is either working per a company per se, so being with a contract with a certain name or brand, and that's basically what I'm currently doing with Nike. So I'm really involved with them and
Mhm.
their opening and their case, or you can work for a smaller office which is supporting or externally managing the development of certain designs. And that's what I've done like previously and at the time, like even now with a smaller office in that sense. And the clients are a bit different. They're more boutique clients. So like a Philippa K or an Aesop, they're these kind of clients that they have already resources inside, and once in a while they need support on specific projects.
All right.
So that's basically the two scenarios that you
Mhm.
find when you work in retail. You can be an insider, you can be an outsider support.
Okay. And I really can imagine, like, if you're an insider, you are hired by the company, probably there is a series of guidelines and workflows you need to respect. And if you're an outsider, maybe there is more opportunities for novelty.
Not really. Like
Okay.
in both cases, you need to follow guidelines in that sense, and it really depends on the kind of project that the client is sort of looking to have support with. When you're like an outsider, if it's like a custom project and if it's a project that has a challenging timeline,
Yeah.
they feel more comfortable, of course, getting the support. So yes, you can put more of your input, but in many cases they have already some direction, some guidelines, some processes that you need to follow. So you're almost swallowed by the original company, and yeah, it's really difficult at times to realize when you're out. Like you get so involved and so used to their way of working. I remember my time when I was working before Corona with ASICS, and I felt so involved with as part of the company. Like,
Yeah,
yes, like you really become part of a family almost.
of
So
course.
yeah, it's a lovely and fun field to work in.
Yeah, I can also imagine it must be really hands-on. Like for architects, it's not that common to feel part of a big corporation such as Nike. We
Hmm.
had another guest that actually worked with Nike as an external consultant, but he was telling us how the campus came to be, that they have thousands of people on campus. It's
Yeah.
really massive. So it must feel strange as an architect, to be there, to be part of something this big, because in architecture you never get that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. As well, for me, it's difficult to do like exactly one on one. Like, I cannot compare apple to apples. I never worked in a huge architectural firm in that sense. So I don't know. Maybe it's the same.
Yeah,
Maybe feels. But yeah, if you look at Nike, we're talking one of the top billion-dollar corporations in the world. So
yeah,
yes, it's a different ball game than maybe the Zadi, the office in Dubai. I don't know, but yeah,
I can
I
imagine.
cannot really compare 101. But the thing is, you never, as well, for me, at this point, I don't feel this sensation of like, oh, I'm an architect, or this, like, I feel way more than that. I like to, even when I present myself like for jobs and things, I always say to them, like, I'm not a one trick pony. I studied architecture, yes. I'm not simply a designer. I'm not simply like a manager of the design. Like, I can do a variety of things. I have a variety of skills. And I
Okay.
think that's a nice thing when you go into big companies. It's not your title, your on paper definition anymore. You're more than that. You're a person with a number of skills. And you see it as well because a lot of people are able to change their position in a
Mhm.
company. And so that's the nice part of working in certain big environments. Like,
Okay, that's interesting. I think maybe it's useful now to stop for a minute and define two roles you've been kind of covering for a bit.
mhm,
Because one is the retail designer, so the actually the person making the design, making the
yeah,
drawings, and then there is the retail project manager,
mhm,
which is kind of different.
yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit more about those two?
Yeah, I can. I mean, so the easiest step from architect to the retail field was, of course, for me going into design. And
Okay.
the design part is super interesting. You learn a lot. You need to keep in mind everything from MAPs to like where you're positioning light switches, like even
Mm.
how customers like go through the store. What is you look into every micro details, like how a wallpaper will connect with a corner. Like it's it's really like a deep dive in a short amount of time into
Okay.
a design. And I really enjoyed that part, I have to be honest, and I learned a lot. But then the frustrating part becomes when the drawing goes to the construction site. And then with the company per se that I was working with, I could follow up the design, but I had to look at pictures that someone would send me from site. And then there is this tendency of taking like a good corner, and then you need to say, yes, it's going great, it's not going great. Like you need to give
Okay.
feedback on the moment on pictures, and you will be amazed how smartly they take pictures.
This
So
is the contractors taking pictures.
yes, the contractor take
So
a
they take
picture.
pictures to make sure that everything looks better than it actually is.
Always. It's like 101. Like for whoever wants to go into retail, that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Never trust the picture that you get and ask wide angles and specifics. But so that was like the design part. And for me, I've done it for 3 years, I think. And then I
Uh-huh.
was like, okay, I really want to see what happens on site. I
Okay.
want to be able to confront these, check, and understand. And another really important part that as a designer we always forget is there is budgets. There is
Of course.
limitations to the ideas and the thought that you have. And that's a bit the architect side, no? You're like
Yeah.
idealistic. You want to do something beautiful. Do you realize what it costs to do it? Majority of times not, I can tell you. So I really wanted to go into that side, and best decision I've ever done.
Yeah.
Like I love it. I thrive in it. Um, it's tough, especially as a woman, because majority of contractors are men.
Of course.
So it can be at times like, they're like, what do you know? You're a girl. You're a young girl. What do you
Whoa.
know? But it's so cool. And as well, at times you're like, oh, this is never gonna happen. And then in the last week it goes really fast.
Yeah, of course. But that I feel it's basically every project on a deadline. Like the last week is
I
always
don't,
this hyper
I don't know.
productive moment.
I feel like you really have miracles happenings at times. But
Cool.
so that's why design and then managing, and in my point of view, they're super interconnected.
Yeah.
How for me, I see my role is never like I'm just a PM or I'm just a designer. I always use both side of my brain in that sense
So
to do it.
you have two hats and you wear them
Exactly.
at occurrence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you were saying like you learned a lot of useful stuff.
Mhm.
Tell us something, Vale. Tell us useful things. There's listeners that wanna get better at this.
Oh my God. Then they're going to come and steal my job.
That's what every guest has been saying. Like I remember Yorick from episode, I don't remember the number, I think 4. He was basically saying, yeah, I cannot share too much, otherwise people steal my job.
Exactly. It's like if Batman would come out and be like, oh, this is where my bat cave is. And everyone would be like, okay, man, let's have a party there. Let's go see it.
Sorry, guys, but Valentina will not share where the light switches are. Sorry, figure it out by yourself.
I mean, I already did the name dropping and all of that. No, I think, one, I already gave out. Like, never accept The first
The
picture,
pictures,
always
yeah.
ask more picture, always ask more angles.
Yeah.
That's like trick number one in my book. Second one is always have a good email explaining everything that needs to happen. Like in
A good
retail,
email.
yes, because in retail there is a lot of conversation that happens like this. Like you're just meeting someone on site, you're discussing something, and then if there is no traceability, is it a word? I don't even know.
Traceability. Yeah.
Traceability.
Sounds like that, at
So
least.
if you cannot trace it back, you have an issue.
Okay.
You have an issue. You have an issue with your budget later on. So be good, precise, concise in your emails, and always, if you discuss something, send like notes right after.
Notes.
That's another tip.
As agreed, I recap here what we discussed in person. A, B, C, D.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. So, guys, track everything. That's the big lesson today.
Yeah.
And so, besides emails, Vale, can you tell us a bit of construction site stories? Like you mentioned here that being a woman, a young woman, sometimes can be complicated. Let's put it like this.
Yeah.
Tell us something about it. I want to hear stories.
Oh my God. I think I erased them from my brain as well. But no, what I can tell you is, for me, like the first project that I was going on site, they were always a bit like looking up and down, like, okay, you're young, you're a woman. How can you tell us what to do, kind of thing. But the beautiful thing is as well, the people on site, the workers, like the electricians, the painters, the mill workers, they're humans at the end of the day. So you really need to have empathy, in my point of view. And we always in the end find like a nice relationship with all the GCs that I've worked with. But it took a bit, like you need to let them understand, like, I am knowledgeable on one side, and on the other, I'm not just here to raise my voice, shout, or demand. That's a balance that you need to have. And my secret was always bringing like croissants to the guys when I was visiting as well.
Croissants.
Yeah, take them by their stomach, like they're happy. And then you're like, okay, guys, I have some bad news for you. You need to change everything.
You're fired.
No, thank God that was not ever the case.
That's not in your job description.
Not yet. You never know.
Okay, and Vale, going back to the GC, you mentioned the GC right now. Who's a GC?
Yeah, true. I know. I have all these acronyms that GC is general contractor.
General contractor.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny. I'm teaching my mom as well all these little things. Like, I think a few days ago, I got an email from a contact that I'm working on a project with in Poland. And I just wrote an email and I wrote like FR. And the guy replied like, sorry, what is FR? Like, and I'm like, fitting rooms. But when you're into retail, those are the acronyms, like GC, FR is fitting rooms. Like it's a standard. But we tend to forget that not everyone works just in retail. So for the guy, it was fire rated. And I was like, oh, it's fitting rooms. So.
Fire rated?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Like when a material is fire resistant. Like it has a certain resistance for...
And for you, it's fitting rooms.
Yeah. So for me, it was FR doors, is fitting room doors. And for him, it was fire rated doors. So it was really funny. There is a lot of acronyms.
This was someone in Canada.
No, this was someone in Poland.
In Poland, sorry.
Yeah.
It's very hard to keep up because I'm not used to do this live. Like being live requires a lot more attention. It's 3 times more inputs. Like normally
your
I'm just
brain is like
there,
swelling.
Exactly. Like normally I'm just sitting there watching a screen. There's someone saying smart stuff for 2-3 minutes,
and in
then
this
I
case,
respond.
the opposite.
No, man, this is very useful knowledge. I'm very happy you're sharing this with us. It's funny because friends don't always talk about these things. So I'm learning from Valentina most of these things right now, guys, like right now.
Yeah, we have different paths. And I think as well, that's a bit at times, for me, I feel really uncomfortable talking with people who do standard architecture, for example. Like they look at me like alien, like
alien.
What are you doing? Why are you there? I think it's a bit how we're trained as architects. No, you always have this idea, like when you're studying, I always had this sensation. You feel like you're a bit in a cult, In
a cult, yeah.
You need to have certain goals. You need to work for a certain office. You need to do these kind of things. Like there is sort of a hidden checklist, and you feel like you need to cross all of these, and then you're a valuable human being, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for people that are working in architecture office at the time, it's almost like a reflex. Like they're so used to that when they hear someone that decided to do something different, they're like, why would you ever decide to not
to leave our cult?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why did you leave our cult?
Yeah, I think it's always a bit kind of a shocker. But a lot of people are changing their minds, though.
Yeah, exactly. I feel things are changing. Like most of the episodes in this podcast really show architects or designers venturing into different fields.
Yeah.
The perception is changing. Like people are very unhappy with architecture used to be, or at least they're recognizing that this is not as valuable as it used to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like, as well, I'm not going to say this doesn't happen in a corporation. Like the same situation might happen in a corporation. But with architecture, you really feel like you're extremely passionate. You have like a desire, and someone is sort of abusing of this desire out of you, you know?
Yeah.
And there is a limit that you can do that up to the moment that you're like, okay, my well-being is more important than building a village for super rich people in island shaped as a palm in Dubai. You know, I think there is a limit.
Any reference is purely casual. Exactly, purely casual. Yeah.
You know, like you do these things, but at a certain point you're like, okay, I cannot spend my weekends, my evenings and being consumed by this passion, or like you realize at a certain point that it gets a bit abusive. And not all offices are like this. This is not like a standard situation, but I've saw many people that have these inner conflicts and they work many years in architecture and then they decide to do something completely different.
Yeah. What's funny is that I have a friend that came to me saying, I listened to your podcast, I lost complete hope in architecture and I stopped.
Oh my God.
So let's stop the rant for a second and let's start giving a bit of hope back to architects. Like what opportunities are out there? Because this is a huge market, no?
It is a huge market. At the same time, it's a really small world. So pay attention on what you do. No, but I mean, I think it's super sad hearing something like that, but I sort of understand where it might come from, because if you leave standard architecture, of course, you're not going to say like, oh, that's what you should do. Like, you have a different perception. So I think it's as well like your listener or this friend of yours should more realize is actually there is a lot of opportunities instead of seeing the negative side, you know, like, Indeed. Oh, they're talking bad about standard architecture. And as well, as I said before, it depends. Their offices, they're amazing. Like I worked as an architect as well. I made this decision to not continue because the challenge there was it was a small office. They couldn't pay me enough. But it was a really human interaction, even this. Like for them, they explained, okay, we have a limitation. It was not transactional. It was not like, this is it, that's the door kind of situation. It was really like, okay, unfortunately, this is what we can do now. You can decide. We would love to have you. Like it was really human. So there is really, really nice offices, but there is a lot of sort of abusive more environments. But the good thing, as you said, there is a lot of opportunities for architects. Like Ferre became like a stylist and he was designing amazing stuff. I became a
You became a star.
I became a star as well. No, but you know, like you can reinvent yourself.
There's a lot you can do, of course.
Yes. I had a teacher in high school. So I did like the artistic high school and it was still like interior design kind of focus. And I had this teacher who told me like, you know, you as architects, you have a humanistic side and you have a technical side, which gives you like a way bigger push than a lot of other people. Like some people are just technical. Some people are just like more like on the humanistic side of sciences. So it's really, possibilities are endless.
Of course.
You can reinvent yourself. You can do 1,000 things. And I think that's what people should get from this podcast. They hope that you're not just that. You're more than that. You can do more than that. And just go out and explore.
Here's our message of hope. Yes. In times of change, if you change fast enough, you're part of the change. It's a horrible message. I framed it in a horrible way.
I was trying to help you, but you're like, you went the other way. Like, okay, let's make it really technical.
I said change like 5 times.
Yes, exactly. No, people listen to me. Like, there is hope. There is a lot of great opportunities, and there is a lot of amazing things that can be done with a background in architecture and with passion. Passion brings you everywhere. So
Indeed. And if you are interested in a career change, I encourage you, go listen to episode 5, I think, of this podcast. I'm still a bit lost with the numbers, but it's Jake Rudin. It's called Career Change.
I love him.
I know you're a
Big
fangirl.
fan. Oh my god! If just this that I'm like on the same podcast as him, I'm like goals.
Yeah,
I've
he
reached-
works for the competition. Jake works for Adidas, and you're in Nike.
Let's not bring names at this point. I think that's not healthy.
We're all part of one big family.
We're all part of the big retail family. No, but I think like I really love his message.
Yeah,
I really love it. Like I was following him before, like he was a guest on your podcast in that sense. Like through LinkedIn, I found him, and yeah, he really is an advocate for out of architecture, like what to do. You're not just that. So yes, go listen to him. I think that's a really nice episode as well.
All right. So if you're interested in getting out of architecture and into the retail industry, or if as an architect, you want to start getting commissions in the retail world, I think it's a good time to start asking ourselves, Vale, some questions on what type of processes are behind these projects. Meaning, who decides that you need to open a store? And we're talking about big corporations here. So your type of client.
Yeah, of course, these are high level decisions in that sense, and they're always studying like a bit the markets and like where are like niches. And of course, in the current times, they use the knowledge, like the data driven knowledge. You see where your customer base is based on online sales, and then you decide maybe to target a certain location due to that. Or you realize, okay, we have markets saturated in these kind of regions or these kind of countries, and we have an opportunity in other countries. So it's a really high-end decision, like they're investing in the real estate development, like the physical locations. So not something that I'm involved directly, I have to be honest, but I've seen with other companies a bit what they do. And when I was working more in a startup kind of environment, which was VAMOF, like electric bikes, the decision there was really based on where our customers are. Where can we service them? Because the need was a bit different. It was not like the sale in itself, but was the servicing. So the retail location was really like a support to the client.
All right. So there would be a head of retail, I imagine, or someone in charge of processing this data and then saying, okay, actually, we have now a budget to open 5 stores, and then they pick locations. And then what happens after that? After the decision is made, who comes into the game?
Yeah, I mean, there is 1,000 ways even there, because if you want the example of Nike, depending on the location, like the geo in which you are, there is different needs. And there is different specifics. Like US is a big market in which a lot of stores are easily owned. And there is a lot of partnership. You have franchisee. Like there is a lot of different ways to open a store. And the ways in which you open a store, like if it's a franchisee, if it's a store in store, if it's like a big flagship, like all of these different layering of developments, they of course entitle different people to be involved. So if I would explain all of those processes, most probably we'll stay here for ages. And as well, every company has its own approach. But as a general guideline, like the moment that you decide on a location, then the process of sourcing more details about the location and start the design process are jump-started. So, for example, you have real estate, like real estate managers that are involved. They look at, okay, we're in Amsterdam, the center of Amsterdam, this area is more saturated for, let's say, Zara, like all these kind of sellers. And they target, of course, location based on the kind of customer and if there is similarity in the kind of customer that you guys have. So you will not find Louis Vuitton next to Zara, for example.
So there is a bit of a like zones for luxury, zones for cheaper kind of retailers, zones for maybe house stuff or house materials. And so I can really imagine there is a quite complex process behind this. And there is a point where the request of a project lands on your desk. At that point, would the location already be decided, or do you have to pick the location yourself?
No, in my case, when I start working, the location is decided. So that part with real estate and even legally, like the signing of
Yeah.
agreements and all of that, that's already sort of done and finalized. So when I specifically start working on a location, I know what is the location, and then I need to figure out how we're going to bring that design to life in this location.
Okay.
So it's a matter more of studying like what might be blockers, what might be gains. Majority of times, designs are even developed ahead of knowing all the specifics of a
So wait,
certain
wait.
location.
You have a design, but you don't even know where the store is going to be.
In some cases, yes. So you always have guidelines. When you're working for a big client, they know their stores look X, like white walls, blue lights. I don't know. Like they have standards, of course, no?
Okay.
And then they adapt them to a location. And then you need to see if that location actually is able to have the white walls. Maybe there is a request from the landlord. It's an historical building. You need to keep the existing walls, which are, I don't know, like brick, exposed brick, and you cannot paint them. You cannot do
Okay.
anything. So that's a bit when my job sort of starts, is more that part when we start developing a design and adapt it to a certain location. And we find as well the challenges. So it's a lot of, learnings and adapting. Is never you design something and it goes perfectly in that box that you got as a DVG in that
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
The DVG, one thing, reality, another.
Completely different.
Yes.
And Vale, so we get there. We get to the point where you get the design, you get the guidelines. One came first. We don't know which one.
Depends on the client.
I imagine there is a moment where you have to adapt a bit this design to the actual store, and then green light, let's start building. Then the GC, the general contractor, comes in the game, I guess.
No, the general contractor comes sort of at the same time. So you have a design base or a tender,
Okay.
which defines like the store requirements or like some information. It really varies from client to client. I worked with clients that had really minimal information on the technical part of it. So yes, the lights, the HVAC system, so all the ventilations and all of that part.
Yeah.
The fire systems, like where you're gonna put like emergency lights or like all those parts, or the technicality are completely missing. And what is there is just like, we're gonna put this kind of furniture in this location.
So the contractor becomes part of the process.
The contractor becomes part of the process and gets to tender, so they get to give like a pricing based on the information available.
Okay.
And then of course there is a few times of back and forth because you need to discuss these adaptation, these limitations. So they give you a first price, you're gonna go back and say, oh, actually, because of this, we need to add 600 lights.
Okay.
The system of HVAC needs to be as this strong because of certain regulations in that area, whatever. Like you bring up more details and then they refine their quotation. And at those stages, you have more than one GC. So you're tendering to see who would be the best fit to bring the store to life. But they're involved almost at the same time. So there is a lot of stream of works happening. And the phase right after will be when you assign the project to one of these contractors.
So at that point, I imagine, okay, you assign one contractor and then you get started.
Yeah.
And then I guess your role comes into play. So the project manager, because if I understand right, you are mediating and checking that all parties involved get the right information and do the right tasks at the right time.
Yeah, so you're involved before, actually.
Before.
You're involved even during this tendering. But even there, like, it's a bit difficult to narrow it down because when you have a big corporation, you have a lot of people with minor tasks. So the workload is really divided. There is one person in charge of one item, one person for another. When you're working for external for a client, even if that client is huge, you're taking more responsibility, you're doing more, and you're involved from the tendering up to the opening and even after post-opening.
Okay.
So it really varies on the kind of client. I would say the best case scenario, in my point of view, you're responsible from tendering up to post-closing. So you're really like
Closing the
That-
project, not closing the store.
No, not closing the project.
Of
Yeah,
course.
so that's basically, it really is your baby. You're responsible, you're reliable, which can be good or bad, of course. But that's the best situation because you can keep track of all the changes, all the variation, all the elements involved. But when I look at my experience with like a bigger corporation like a Nike, we're a team of people.
Yeah.
So
It's not
the
one person.
workload is divided between all of us, and we work in synergy. So of course you push forward a uniform message and a uniform process, but you're less involved in day-to-day maybe topics.
Yeah, everyone needs to be up to speed.
Yeah.
And in terms of standard projects, I think we covered it quite enough. There is a manual. You kind of apply that manual, the template to specific sites.
Yeah.
But I also know, like, I make the example of McDonald's. McDonald's, I think, is quite widespread, whether it's a franchise or an own store, but there is very strict design guidelines. But then here and there, a special commission pops out, and all of a sudden is this little architectural gem. I remember one in Rotterdam, which is quite famous.
Yeah,
I think it was elected one of the most beautiful McDonald's in Europe.
I like to call it the gold nugget.
The gold nugget.
Yes.
Yeah, because for all those listening, guys, it's like a golden box, basically.
Yeah, basically. A bit baroque.
A bit baroque. It's kind of beautiful, but I mean, I really imagine there they hired an architect from Rotterdam, which made a site-specific and completely unique design, right? When does this happen?
Even there can be a lot of reasoning, of course. Is mostly the strategy behind a certain brand. Like one brand that narrowed these to the T, in my point of view, is Aesop. So Aesop did it for many, many years. It was their strategy. They were not opening a bulk of stores. They were not opening thousands of stores a year. They were opening selected location with localized architects doing their store. So every single one will be like a representation of the local and the brand at the same time. And that was their strategy. They stand it out that way. Like people knew them because of that strategy.
But isn't this very expensive then? Then every project is completely unique. Like you are commissioning a lot of architectural services, no?
Yes, but at the same time, you're not opening many stores.
Okay, you're more curated.
Exactly. So it's a decision on, okay, we have X budget, we're going to divide it 3 times or we're going to divide it 10.
Okay.
Is a choice. I think that's an example of a brand that crafted it perfectly. Is not something that I think works with every brand. I remember having this sort of talk, like informally, with a colleague of mine when I was in Bamoff. Like, why, like a startup like Bamoff, what should be the approach for them? Like when they're opening certain location, they're not opening a bulk of location, they're opening less. Should they be customized, localized, and all of that? In that case, no. In that case, what you're doing, you're giving a service. Like being connected to the local materials or all of that becomes an additional expense and not a gain for your brand identity. So yeah, it's really a study and a selection. I'm not sure why McDonald's decided to do that. It could have been is the 100th store that they're going to open in the Netherlands. You know, it really varies, like the reasoning to do this sort of custom experiences. But markets that are really investing in those are like in Asia. Like in Asia, it's really everything is customized, everything is unique. It's almost a battle who
makes the coolest, the weirdest store.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Like I think it's best field.
There was this whole battle with the store facades at some point. Like you know, the store inside would be made by, let's say, standardized designs, but the facade would be made by MBRDV, UN Studio, OMA, like all the big names, right?
That though, the funny thing is as well, if that's a prime example of how it might be 1,000 reasons behind what a customer sees. Because, for example, what happened, the example that you're making is here in Amsterdam and is PC Hofstraat.
PC Hofstraat, yeah.
Which is like the main road for high-end shopping of Amsterdam.
Luxury street, basically.
Luxury street, yes. And the funny thing is that area is owned by certain families and they all own basically the entire strip of stores.
Oh, really?
Yes. And they tend to renovate a lot, of course, like those buildings. They're old buildings. And in the Netherlands, thank God, you have regulations for which you can demolish majority of a building. Like, there is ways to rethink how a facade would look. And I know what has been done with Chanel was like sort of together, like they looked at these and they designed these. But in other situations, when they're doing new facades, it's not even the client requesting it, but it's the owner
The
of the
owner.
unit
Okay.
deciding to do these. And PC Hofstraat is a perfect example. If you go there now, there is thousands of different facades. They're not the brand that requests them, is
Is the owner.
landlord, the owner that says, I want to have the best unit on this road.
Okay, so you can Google Maps it and see how it looks like with Street View.
I hope they update it because it's always busy and there is
Yeah.
always incredible developments happening there. But yeah, that's funny. Like, that's not a customer, a Louis Vuitton, a Chanel, or someone else saying, this is the store that I want. So that's even the thing. A majority of retails are not owned. They're rented.
They're rented. And Valentina, this I think bridges quite well with another kind of topic I would like to explore with you, which is a bit what is the future of retail? Because I have this feeling that corporates especially are kind of changing the role of stores. Like it feels like, stores are sometimes more of a statement or a marketing move or a showroom rather than an actual retail place where, for efficiency, you need to sell as many clothes as you can. Is that true, or is it only my bias?
Even there, you need to look who you are as a brand and who are you catering to. When we look at fast fashion, that's the case. It's just like open, make as much money as possible. That's a bit the situation. When you have other brands have different approach. I think for me, something that I became really aware being in this field and I see as a major importance moving forward is integrating sustainability in how we develop retail.
Okay.
Physical retail will never die, in my point of view. There is a lot of...
Will never die?
No, in my point of view, no. Like, there is a lot of people who are always like the Black Crow going like, they're going to close all of them. No one is going to go, especially post-corona. Like, everyone was like, no one is ever going to go to a store anymore. And it's quite the opposite. Like, people want to go and want to experience, but we're in the society of experiences, of moments, of collecting this sort of...
Yeah, Instagram moments as well.
Yes.
Experiencing and sharing, no?
Yeah, and sharing and like even oversharing at times. But yeah, so that's what retail is faced with. Like, you need to keep always interesting. You cannot just be like a bunch of clothes thrown around and people figure it out. You need to do something more. But at the same time, the necessity is really that brands start thinking how to make it more sustainable, because these developments have a huge impact on environments. Yeah. Like, you're basically ripping out existing structures and systems and rebuilding almost new 85% of the time. I'm not going to say 100, but majority of times it is. Nike has this beautiful initiative, like the Move to Zero.
Move to Zero.
Yeah, so for them is really like a goal is actually, we need to, no matter the fact that we're huge, we have different geos, we have different necessity, we need to start localized. We need to start being more mindful which materials we source, where we source them, how we source them, and if these materials have a secondary life.
Okay.
Or what is the cost of sort of wasting those if ever you need to change the store or something.
Yeah.
It's a huge workload. It's not something that is going to happen like from one day to the other, but I think it's really a commitment that brands need to start having more and more.
But I can really imagine this is a huge challenge. Like, the way I see it, well, first of all, we're talking about corporates. So we're talking about corporations that own tons of stores, right? Like, we are not talking about the single entrepreneur that opens one nice clothing store or a cafe. They have different processes. But when we talk about big corporations, it's a lot of stores at the same time. Sometimes in a year they open hundreds, and in a year after they open zero. How do you manage to be sustainable if it's such an unstable process? You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean. And I mean, the sustainable side is so wide. Like, there is a lot of things that need to happen, and I'm pretty sure at a certain point we might be able to do like a 60%, but not 100.
So
But
it's
I
move
think
to zero, meaning that move to zero, but we start from 100. Then we
no. I mean, I'm not talking specific case in that sense. I just mean
Yeah.
in general. If you look at how things are approached, what you can do is partial, because there is as well an effective need. No, when you get a certain unit and maybe they have already lights, and you could say, okay, we reuse these current lights, but they might not work for the purpose.
Yeah.
So there is limitations there aside of your capability. You know, you need to rip those lights, throw them out, and buy new ones. So it's
even if they
unfortunate.
are perfectly functional.
Yeah, but many times they're located weirdly, or like they're maybe older, so they consume more. Like there is a lot of what ifs. So that's why I'm saying like it's not going to be 100, but I think we can go to a comfortable 60, which will help the world immensely already. When you look at bigger companies, what can be done is approaching more efficiently. So looking at having deals, having arrangements with certain local companies on terms like, okay, we're going to open X amount of store in X amount of years. We want you guys to be our current supplier. I have stock for us. It's a lot of legal terms, agreements.
Framework agreements, I would
Yes.
say.
But that should be something that companies are thriving for. I know companies that are doing it. I work directly for companies that are doing it, and they're focusing on that. Unfortunately, yeah, it takes a lot of people. It takes a village, and as well, when you have a lot of approvals, is slows down a bit, like the speed at which you can achieve it.
Yeah.
But it's good just to already the fact that some companies have this mindset. I think you see it a lot now is how many companies are going proud if they have like a big corporation stamp. That for them is like, I'm a big corporation. That means like you have a certain attitude, you have a certain approach, and of course it's wider than just opening a store.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think every new brand should be saying this, like, I'm not just doing it mindlessly to make a lot of money, but I'm doing it as well. I realize the impact that I have on the world.
Yeah. And this, like while you were talking, I had this light bulb moment because I saw two huge opportunities. As designers, we could first help corporates in reprocessing or reutilizing what's already on site, which is something that it's an expertise that not many have. Because I can really, picture this process. Like if I have my big book that tells how to do retail all around the world, it doesn't matter where, then you want to throw everything away. But if you need to use what's on site, you need a bit of design power. And then second, I see huge opportunity in, if you have to throw everything away, maybe you as a designer could start a bank where you store these things and resell them, because this is valuable functional stuff. This is good materials.
There is actually, they're more like on sort of vintage elements, but there is a lot of companies that do that, and they're I don't know if fully owned by architects, but you can see some people in their team are architects, that they actually if there is like a demolition of an historical building, like they take different parts, like the windows, the glass, the thing, and instead of just throwing it on like the trash bins, they see how it can be reused or resell. And I think is wonderful. Like if we all had that mentality, it would improve a lot. But I have to be honest, that's a bit where the ego of an architect comes in. Many times, it's this thing like, oh, I just want it to be beautiful, and not thinking what is the cost of the beautiful.
But I think this is my pledge. Like my first one went really bad, so I'm going to try a different one. I think we have to stop thinking about beautiful and start thinking about what it does for the world, what it does for the users, what it does for the budget. Yeah. Like focus on value, don't focus on beauty. No, like I feel
you can find a good compromise as well, like
course.
you can find a perfect compromise. But yes, I think that should be really necessary, especially after, even here in the Netherlands, we had like the warmest October, November ever, and then it went to -1. Like if there is still someone who doesn't believe in global warming, I mean, I don't know how to convince you, but guys, it's pretty evident we that should be our thrive. And architects in retail, we have that passion. We should push to make things better.
Okay. So three actual opportunities. One is help companies design with what they find on site rather than in reinventing. Second is put up a business of reuse, like salvage all the stuff from projects where you maybe intervene and try to sell them to other projects or implement them. And third, implement circular economy, secondhand stuff in your projects. Reuse, reuse, reuse.
Yeah.
Super. So we covered the circular economy part. I would say let's wrap it up with some advice.
Okay.
First, it's a traditional question. We cannot not do it in the last episode. Ooh. What's your advice, Vale, for people that are practicing already for a while? Maybe they have their own firm. Maybe they are already quite far in their career.
People that would like to explore new options, or just as a general?
Let's go with that. New options.
Yeah, I think in my point of view is question yourself and ask a lot of questions to other people, like over ask almost at times. Like, be curious and see what else is outside of your bubble. Like, we tend to be really in our bubble. So I think just that, like, you've always done A, and of course now you're a specialist in A, but you should know that you have more than just A. So go out, talk with people, realize what are their possibilities and how you can help out, or how you can test your limits as well. I think that's something to keep. Like, don't get comfortable where you are.
Good. And if you have trouble with the general contractor, bring croissants.
Exactly, to the guys.
That's very good advice. And for people that are about to start their career, or they just started, they're still figuring out where to go, what choices to make, what would you tell them?
Okay, I would tell them similar, like, just try things, be bold. I mean, be mindful of, don't oversell yourself in a sense that you're like, I can do everything, because that's what happens when you just graduated. You feel like you own the world. No, I'm going to tell you, you don't own the world. But I think, like, really be humble in a sense, like, okay, this is what I can offer. This is what I want to learn. And don't limit yourself. Like, test something different. Maybe you don't find work in an architecture office right away. Try something different and see a bit. And everything teaches you a lot. Like, every job that you do teaches you something that then you bring to the next one. So don't underestimate the skills that you're learning from whatever, even bartending. Like, you're gonna learn certain skills that you're gonna bring back later on. So I think just don't demoralize, try things, don't be too rigid with yourself, like, I want to do this point, if I don't get this, I'm a failure. No, try and invest like positive energy into the process. And then I think one thing that for me became like a lifestyle.
A lifestyle?
Yes, is really a lifestyle, is a phrase that an ex-boss of mine told me. And it's really useful for everything that you do in life. And it's a funny anecdote as well. So he always told me, at times you do something and you're saying, like, yeah, I assume they have already done this. Like, they designed this, I guess they already done this. And he told me, assume makes an S of you and me. Like, if you break down the phrase, no? And this stick to my brain. So always ask, better ask twice than assuming. Assuming will bite you off later on. So ask a lot of questions all the time.
Be curious. Ask a lot of questions and be unafraid of taking risks.
And remember, assume. S, you, me. Remember.
Assume, make an ass of you and me.
It's marvelous. It's really like it became a new thing.
And what is some advice for, maybe there is an office out there, a small practice that wants to start working with corporations on these projects that are either more flagship, like the golden nugget of McDonald's, or maybe they are temporary spaces. There is a lot of temporary installations that brands do. What should they do? Like, how do they get in touch with either the marketing or the retail team and get considered when it comes to assignments like this?
I mean, you just need to put yourself out there. You just need to pitch. You just need to try over and over and over. There is many creative agencies and architectural offices that work with retail clients.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of reaching out to people and create your own network via LinkedIn and like be active in that sense. Like you need to be a bit bold. You cannot expect that things just fall on your lap kind of thing. And as well, people working in these kind of environments which are really active, they're used to this. They're used to interactions. They're used to exchange. So just be bold. Get in touch with people and see what might be opportunities and how you can help. But
Also a bit of networking,
be realistic as well, that this is not architecture. This is a fast-paced environment. This is an environment in which you need to a bit shed your previous skin and be open to what the needs are of that environment.
Okay. And I like that it links well to your previous advice, like ask questions. This is an environment that might be new to you. Maybe the best way to get in there is asking questions to the right people.
Yeah.
Show interest and see what happens. Valentina, thank you so much.
Anytime.
First, for being an amazing friend. Second, a very knowledgeable friend. And third, for taking the time of coming live and setting this up together and having such a cool, fun last episode. Yeah, I just want to say also to you listening, like for today, if you're a usual listener, normally we would have explored a boundary breaking business model idea, which we will not do. I think we would just want to wrap it up here by saying a big thank you to all of you listening and to all the guests that came. For me, it was an amazing experience. And there is credits at the end of every episode. Well, these people also gave a huge support technically and mentally, because this podcast was a lot of work. I'm not sure there will be a second season. We planned 10 episodes and this was a lot of fun, but also very demanding. So I think we'll wrap it up here for now, but stay in touch through social media, Nonay Podcasts on Instagram and Nonay on LinkedIn. If there is any updates, if we come back, you'll see it there. In the meantime, I encourage you to go back, listen to the other episodes. They're super, super useful if you want to know what's beyond architecture. I thank you for listening, and for the last time, have a great week. Bye-bye. That's it.
Beyond Architecture is a Nonay podcast. This episode has been developed with the financial support of the Dutch Creative Industries Fund. Editorial support and marketing for Nonay, Marco Mattia Cristofori, Daniela Silva, and Francisco Rivera. Sound supervision by Daniel van de Poppe for Spraakmaker Media. Advisory, Max Augustijn, Martine Chloe van de Bomen, Francesco De Stefano, and Anne Bruna. I'm Luca De Stefano, your host, and this was Beyond Architecture.